Welcome everybody. This is the community outcomes meeting where the Mayor and myself meet with West Yorkshire Police and ask them questions that have been agreed in advance and for which minutes and reports are produced, and they are on the website if anyone who's watching wants to refer to those papers. We have an opportunity through this meeting to connect with the public of West Yorkshire, give them an insight into how the Mayor and I undertake our scrutiny function, and if you think of any questions or you want to contribute in the future, if you contact my office, I'm sure that we can think about how to incorporate any of your suggestions into future requests to the police. So we're going to start off by welcoming everybody and doing some introductions. I'm Alison Rowe, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and we're going to go around this way.
Okay, I'm Catherine Hankinson. I'm the Deputy Chief Constable for West Yorkshire Police.
Damien Miller, Assistant Chief Constable for West Yorkshire Police with responsibility for local policing and safeguarding.
Ed Chester's, Temporary ACC for operational support within West Yorkshire Police.
Temporary Chief Superintendent Sarah Thornpage, Director of Corporate Services for West Yorkshire Police.
Dan Axon, Communications Officer at the Combined Authority.
Sean Moore, Engagement Manager at the Combined Authority.
Paige Caroline, Engagement Officer at the Combined Authority.
Julie Reid, Head of Policing and Crime in the Policing and Crime team.
Miss Hunter, Director of Policing and Workplace at the Combined Authority.
Thank you. We have apologies from Mr John Robbins, the Chief Constable, who's on leave this week, and also from the Mayor, who was unable to attend. So we'll move straight on to the notes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of January. We have agreed that all the matters arising are ongoing, so we'll revisit these at the next meeting. So the Mayor and Chief Constable's announcements. One of the things that the Mayor wanted us to mark at this meeting was that since we met in January, we've had sight of Baroness cases report into the Met, and as the public might have expected, we've had several conversations with West Yorkshire Police about the findings of Baroness Casey, and we're expecting a much more detailed report back from West Yorkshire Police as a consequence, although many of the issues that were raised have been the subject of ongoing scrutiny and reports over the last nearly 2 years. But we did think it was an important opportunity to ask West Yorkshire Police to comment to the public on the findings and hopefully give some reassurance about what we're doing here in West Yorkshire. So I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Constable Catherine Hankinson to comment.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. As people may be aware, obviously the Baroness Casey report was very much focused on the Metropolitan Police Service. However, I think all of policing understands that that report will have had a huge impact on confidence and trust in policing, not just in the metropolitan area, but across the country, and West Yorkshire Police is not exempt from that. So as the Deputy Mayor says, we are still working through the detail of the report to understand what learning there is in there for us. It is a very comprehensive report, and there will be things, no doubt, as there are from most national reports, things that we can learn and pick up as good practice. But as a force, the Chief and I and the Chief Officer team are really clear with the staff in West Yorkshire Police that discriminatory behaviour of any kind isn't tolerated, whether that's internally with our own colleagues, whether that's externally with members of the public, on duty, off duty. There is no place for half measures, and we expect the highest standards of our police officers and staff in West Yorkshire. So internally we have to continue to give support and that continuous message, which we are doing and continue to do to our staff, that that behaviour is unacceptable. And then really importantly, when our staff come to us and report that kind of behaviour, we've got to listen to them and give them support and take action against the people that are involved. Equally important, what I should say actually, is one of the things that we're doing internally, and you may have seen some things on social media about this, is we are one of the forces, I think we're the first force nationally, to undertake bystander, upstander training with all of our officers and frontline staff, which gives them the confidence to come forward and to have those difficult conversations where that kind of discriminatory behaviour is happening. So we are at the forefront of that training in West Yorkshire. And externally, obviously we need to maintain the focus on victims, witnesses and public service. We understand collectively that we owe it to the public who live and work in West Yorkshire to deliver that professional, compassionate and fair service. We are not complacent in any way in terms of the Casey report, and we'll continue to root out that poor behaviour on behalf of the public, but also on behalf of the vast majority of our members of officers and staff who do a fantastic job day in and day out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So just two other items to note. First of all, we wanted to say that we were very pleased at the extradition of a suspect in the PC Sharon Beshinitsky murder. It happened in 2005. It was like yesterday. It's something that will never ever be resolved until it is resolved, and we're one step closer. So we wanted to pass on our congratulations to all the partners who made the extradition possible. Clearly there's a process, and that process will take place, and we don't want to preempt any of that, but the extradition in itself is a big success, and we want to thank everybody who's been party to that. And the other announcement that we wanted to make again is to congratulate West Yorkshire Police on Operation Tendency, which last week has seen yet more serious offenders being sentenced to prison, and we wanted the public to understand that Tendency is an ongoing operation, and so far we've had perpetrators sentenced to 505 years just on Operation Tendency, and since 2016 131 people have been sentenced to nearly 1,500 years. So I wanted to make that announcement, but also to say that the fantastic work of our CSEA unit here in West Yorkshire that has delivered those fabulous that fabulous justice for victims will be cut 35%, and I just wanted to mark the fact that such great success may not be possible going forward due to that cut from government, which was announced in January. If there are no announcements from West Yorkshire Police,
No, I don't think there are, thank you.
then we'll move on. So the first paper is use of force, which is going to be led by temporary ACC Ed Chesters.
Thanks and afternoon again, everybody. So we do frequently bring an update on this report, as you're aware, because I think everybody would accept and appreciate that it's a sensitive subject and upon which a large degree of public trust and confidence rests, doesn't it? So and I think in summary, rather than go through every single page of the report, which is lengthy, just to give an overview for the meeting and anybody watching, really West Yorkshire Police is committed to developing its understanding of how officers and staff use force when conducting our duties, some of which are obviously high impact in nature, but more on a routine daily basis as well. We recognise that we are privileged to lawfully use force to execute our duties, so it's something we don't take lightly. But we also recognise that in having that privilege, that there is a clear need to be transparent about what we do, make sure it's legitimate so people have trust and confidence in the fact that we're doing the right thing in the right way, and of course being able to account for everything we've done. So this paper in summary then gives an update on the use of force across the organisation for the last period. The headlines then being a 43% rise in the submission of use of force forms as a starter. So really that seeks to increase the rate of reporting when we use force. And when I say use force, actually, that will range from everything around verbal communication with a subject or suspect all the way through to a really high-end use of force potentially involving firearms. So the fact that we're increasing our submission about forms mean, certainly for the organisation, we've got higher confidence that we're reporting more often on what we're doing. Out of those reporting mechanisms, then we're using lower uses of force more often. I've talked about being able to verbally communicate with suspects and subjects, so that's a positive trend for us there in that we're using that tactic more often, rather than just resorting to higher end uses of force. Inequalities is also catered for within the report. We'll possibly come to it with the questions, but I think we would recognise there is disproportionality in that. But again, as the report makes clear, we're working really hard to understand the reasons for that. That then feeds training and development processes and programmes for our colleagues so that they can better consider what they're doing when they're considering the use of force. Body-worn video, so that's embedded. Again, there's a question around that. We are working towards 100% compliance with that, and for us that again is a daily conversation where we'll routinely check that body-worn video has been used in a deployment of any nature for that matter. But outside of our daily morning meetings, I chair a gold group that does look at the usage of body-worn video and seeks to establish 100% compliance about that. We mention that because obviously that gives a clear insight into how we've done that, hopefully in a transparent manner, and are considering in wider forums in which we can use that material to demonstrate what's being done, why it's been done, how it's been done, and then being able to answer questions about that. And then last couple of points there, projected reduction in the number of complaints by 3 to 4%. So small numbers, but a positive direction of travel, I'd suggest. And then assaults on officers have declined slightly, because I suppose any encounter using force has a two-way reaction, really. So if we're seeing a decline in assaults on our officers, then I think we can start to certainly anecdotally be reassured that we're starting to use verbal communications a bit more often, and that we're seeking to resolve encounters more peacefully. Is there any questions on that?
Yeah, thank you. And just for any member of the public who might be watching, this paper is a 6-monthly paper, as ACC Chester has pointed out, and we've been focusing really strongly on compliance of officers to complete the forms that tell us about use of force, but also any disproportionality across a wide number of metrics, but focusing specifically on race, which obviously is something that is traditionally been a difficulty for communities. So we've got a range of questions on the paper, and can I just say that I and the Mayor particularly liked point 7, where you clearly outline your understanding of inequalities to black people, and we felt that was a really welcome addition. And you won't know this, but I've sent it to the APCC as evidence of good practice and moving in the right direction in relation to the Police Race Action Plan, because I thought it was a really good addition, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I suppose just to acknowledge the efforts of Chief Inspector Ben Ryder, who is, to say he's brought a huge degree of analysis and education and research into this area of work is an understatement. So in him, you've got a fiercely committed colleague there.
And I know Ben very well, of course,
Yeah,
and I've been briefed by him in this arena, so thank you.
Okay.
So on page 1, the report states that you've embedded the use of body-worn video, and then on page 10 it states that body-worn video compliance is strong, but you endeavour to improve it. This is obviously something that's really important to the public in terms of trust and confidence. Sure. So how can you fully evidence that the use of body-worn video is happening in a way that can reassure communities?
Yeah, so firstly then, I've already alluded to the fact that certainly most of our daily management meetings will always touch on whether body-worn footage is available in relation to particular incidents of note. I wouldn't say it's perfect. We know we've got some way to go to achieve 100% compliance, and if it helps reassure, we've previously and are currently considering any kind of technological innovation that helps automate the initiation of body-worn video, so it's not down to user choice as to whether the camera starts rolling, if that makes sense. So that's a work in progress. The second point, I think, probably the more important one, is continuing to consider the wider forums where we can practically and proportionately discuss the footage with a user group, in effect a scrutiny panel, an advisory group, who we can discuss the events that have captured on camera and start to give a narrative around that, rather than it being something that's come across in the media, whether that's social and mainstream or community feedback. So we've got that objective piece of evidence that we can jointly assess and consider and discuss in more depth. And I think that's just to help people's understanding of the degrees of force we might use based on what officers are seeing in front of them, but then also take into the view for example, the views and perspectives of the bystander, for example.
Yeah. So have you not got that scrutiny process in place already?
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
right.
I think it's just widening that. Yeah, it's just widening that. I think from my own perspective, having gone to a couple of scrutiny panels, not necessarily for body-worn video, I think there's some real importance in making sure we've got the right attendees there. So somebody who will give us healthy challenge rather than just come because they're interested in what the police do. And that necessarily, I think, probably involves some more challenging conversations to make sure that we've got the right people there.
Yeah, and obviously our community engagement team can absolutely help you there, because we've got a lot of members of the public who are very interested in scrutinising police, and we've got contact with those people, so yeah, we're very happy to help. On page 4, it highlights that you've conducted reviews into the use of force and arrests of black people under the age of 40, and of limb restraints on those under 18 years of age and or women. Just wondered if you've got any conclusions yet to those reviews, and what, if anything, has changed?
Yeah, sure. So I think we've already touched on the fact that we do recognise the disproportionality in the use of force against black people. There is, again, within the main body of the report, a detailed outline of the work that we're undertaking to better understand why that is the case, what we can do to positively address that. So, as I say, we continue to analyse and respond to all elements of those use of force, which again links into the importance of compliance around body-worn video, and then more importantly the submission of the use of force forms. I should add at this point actually that we're seeking another technological adaptation of what we've currently got, which makes it even easier for officers to submit those reports rather than rely on them to fill out, for example, a Word document, so something that can be quickly done at the time. So as I say, the impact is assessed as a risk for us. Things that we're underway with them. So more broadly, I and, for example, public order and safety commanders and firearms commanders, we are talking now and are incorporating into our planning activities and considering the impact on that community or neighbourhood of the operation that we're about to undertake. So conventionally, we would talk about minimising risk of harm to people, securing and preserving evidence, but what we're now clearly considering is if we go to a certain part of West Yorkshire with firearms, is to understand the impact on that community or individuals of doing so, and putting in place plans to mitigate the impact of that. The more specifically, I suppose, having touched on the figures within the report there, and we've already explained that we recognise the disproportionality of the use of force against black people. There is a disproportionate use of handcuffs on Asian people, as one example. I think it's fair to say we're still working really hard to understand why that's the case as well. And then equally, female suspects are more likely to be subjected to spit guards or limb restraints. We think we understand that in terms of female subjects would more usually revert to bodily force rather than have access to weapons. Kicking and spitting, for example. So that kind of explains that. But I think if you take those in the round, hopefully the reassurance is about our current ability and future intent to dig into the details of those and understand what the issues are, so we can explain them more clearly than I'm probably doing at the moment, but then take remedial activity around that to reassure people that if it is proportionate, then the reasons are clear, but if it's disproportionate, then we're taking appropriate action to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you. So it feels like it's a bit organic, the work. So you're understanding some of the data and the work around that's organic, but you've not yet come to any clear conclusions.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be a bit simplistic, I think, to say we've got the solution clear from just an overnight piece of analysis. I think it definitely is one for longer term conversations with people, some of whom might actually have been subject to force, to sort of dissect the encounter and understand what's actually gone on.
Yeah, we'd be really keen to be part of that future understanding of the work to come to conclusions in particular.
And there'll be a piece, won't there, within there is a piece within the Police Raised Action Plan on your screen too, which will specifically look at use of force and taser, etc.
And not over-policing. And
So again, we'll have those links in with that, and there might be some work with the college that might help us better understand some of the data as well.
And again, if it helps sort of reassure about the depths that we're going to, in the last few weeks I've written a bespoke strategy for understanding use of force and the activity that falls out of that. I suppose in layperson's terms, that helps me with the colleagues I'm working with, make sure we've got the right resourcing into this, because we do consider it to be of such importance, really. So it's not something we'll just light touch and try and understand as best as we can. It's something that we're committed to investing in fully to understand it.
Thank you. So considering age, what did you find when reviewing use of taser?
No disproportionality. So when you look at the statistics within the table there, the range that indicates absolute equality is 1.0. And I think taser over the last couple of years has been 0.8 to 1.2. So we're more or less on absolute equality there, which I think probably sounds a bit counterintuitive when you see some of the media narrative about use of force against young people, but we're quite confident with the reports that we're compiling on the statistics and data we're inputting that that's the case.
But it's also hopeful, isn't it? So if there's no disproportionality, then there's not disproportionate use in young people.
Yes.
Therefore, it begins to become more hopeful that disproportionality against young black people, where there's disproportionality in other places.
Of course, there is the sort of intersectionality aspect to it. Yeah, absolutely there is. So it's just about understanding the wider picture around that.
Good, I'll look forward to that.
Okay.
So there are 4 levels of comment on the supervisory reviews, and it suggested that the lack of level 3, practice for concern, and 4 areas of significant concern or serious injuries show good levels of performance. What is in place to ensure that reviews are carried out robustly by sergeants and that their grading of the feedback is correct in the circumstances? So, in other words, are they fiddling the figures because they can?
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I think hopefully for reassurance is that we'll proportionally check the work of the checkers, if that makes sense, but there'll be a limit to where the checkers stop checking, the checkers checking. So we have to be sensible about it, but sergeants' work is of course supervised by inspectors, so there will be that dip sampling and periodic, scaling up to very frequent actually for use of force intrusion into the review activity that's being undertaken, the quality of that, and of course if there's any feedback, whether it's minor or actually that one's really quite badly wrong, then we'll rectify that. I suppose for additional reassurance, certainly for taser, because we still understand its contentious nature, but reviews of the use of taser are conducted by chief inspectors. So that is 3 ranks above the normal user of a taser device. They are done almost real time when the body-worn video footage and the statements of the officers become available to us. And then of course we'll cross-reference that with custody risk assessments that will document, map, photograph injuries or any after effects of the detained person at custody or hospital for that matter. So I think in the round there's a reasonable degree of intrusion into the deployment and use.
Good, thank you. So on page 13, the report talks about 15% of officers being classed as in need of discrete development. How many officers are we talking about, and what does discrete development mean?
Okay, so I took this to be in relation to taser, if I wasn't
mistaken. I mean it's used in
yet.
other contexts, but yes.
Yeah, so discrete development I think routinely would be around verbal communications, so in some instances there will be expletives used, and actually depending on the subject or the nature of the force involved, sometimes expletives can be part of appropriate tactical communications because sadly it's more clearly understood by the person we're dealing with. Hopefully that's a diplomatic way of putting it. But it could also be the handling of the taser, it could be the assessment of the subject's impact factors, what we call the height, size, age, demeanour and so on. Whether the taser works, so it kind of goes both ways. It can be an overuse of taser, but it could also be it was the right thing to do, but you didn't quite do it correctly, if that makes sense. So there's two. Yeah, so there's 2 elements to it in that sense. In terms of numbers, we have, it fluctuates slightly, but about 850 trained taser officers, so 15% of that, if my maths is correct, is about 128. But that doesn't always necessarily mean 128 different officers have got the feedback issues. It could be one colleague with a few of those instances.
So it's 128 instances.
Yes, yeah. So we would be identifying really early on whether somebody's got major developmental needs about how they're using taser. And of course, it's not unknown for us to take people offline while we address those issues.
And obviously, if a member of the public complained about the use of force and use of taser against them, then that would be immediately investigated.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. And then finally on this paper, looking at disproportionality and some of the measures you've included, such as proportionality to threat, not population. Yeah. How confident are you that sharing the data will improve trust and confidence?
If it's done in the right way, I think, and this comes back to the original point about making sure that representatives at scrutiny panels and advisory groups are the right audience, and I think if we try and hopefully demystify the data, I think is the important thing, which again links back to the point about accessibility to body-worn video, which kind of marries up the narrative, if that makes sense. So I'm confident we're headed in the right direction. I think we've still got some work to do, but definitely going the right way.
Thank you. So if we move then to stop and search, which is ACC Miller.
I'll just summarise the paper, Deputy Mayor, because obviously this is, again, one that does impact on public trust and confidence, and we do scrutinise it on a regular basis, as does yourself and your office. So I'd like to reassure the public that all our data is available at www.police.uk in relation to stop and search, and they can access that at any point. When you look at our 12-month data up until the end of December last year, there's been a 5.5% increase compared to the previous reporting in the use of stop and search. 19.1% of all those stops and searches was conducted on children aged 10 to 17 years old, which means an increase of 346 searches on that age group. 59.3% of all searches were conducted for drugs in relation to those undertaken, and Operation Gemlock accounts for 9.9% of stop search activity in 2022, which is a 1.7% increase on the previous year. When you look at how we do our searches, 95% of all searches are on outer clothing, and there's only 1.5 which expose intimate parts, which the public will understand as strip searches. In respect of children aged 10 to 17 years old, outer clothing search made up 99.2% of those searches, and those which were strip searches only accounted for 0.5%, if I could put my teeth in today. Search outcomes, they're split into two. So we've got direct outcomes. So if we search somebody for drugs and find drugs, that's a direct outcome, and that increased from 23.8% to 25.4%. And then we've got positive outcomes, where if we search for drugs but find a knife, i.e. not the item that we've gone for, but something which is prohibited, that's increased from 31.1% on the previous year to 32.5%. Our overall find rate over that period has increased from 21% to 22.4% from the previous year, which is positive. Disproportionality is covered within the paper as well. It's very clear within the paper that there is a greater deal of disproportionality to young males being searched than females. So 91.1% of all searches conducted are on young males, where when you compare it to females, it's only 8.9%. Previously reported that if you were from an ethnic minority background, you were 3.1 times more likely to be subject to a stop and search from a white background. With the latest census data that's been obviously released, that has now reduced to 2.4 times, which is still too high, but it has come down. However, the national average is 3.1, so we are performing better than the national average. The analysis, when we actually look down to it and look at those direct outcome find rates, your 21.1% of those that we search of white people is positive, whereas when you look at ethnic minority groups that are searched, it's 22.4, so there's not too much of a difference there. Operation Gemlock activity is more disproportionate than all stop searches, with a disproportionality ratio of 4.0 to ethnic minorities, which is slightly up from the previous year of 3.8. However, what I want to do is reassure the public that obviously Operation Gemlock focuses on specific areas and is all intelligence based in relation to those activities that we take place, and all that is in relation to serious crime and knife crime as well. So these are often within areas of high deprivation, where the demographic at that micro level is not comparable to county-wide or indeed ward level. Section 60 is covered within the paper. 24 Section 60s were granted in the last 12 months, which is an increase of 14. However, the number of searches conducted under that Section 60 has reduced, because what we are trying to do now is ensure that those searches are laser guided. So when we're signing up those authorities, we're providing the information, the intelligence of which people to target within those areas to the officers who are conducting the searches. The Home Office best use of stop and search scheme, we've got several elements which still are in place. We've still got the lay observation policy, which is the ride-along scheme, and between September and December 2022, 9 individuals participated in that. We still have the race and diversity monitoring in place, and the community complaints trigger, which we still have a threshold of only 1 complaint. So if there's 1 complaint, that will be reviewed and passed to a scrutiny panel. And in the last 12 months, there's only been 12 complaints in relation to that which have been reviewed. In relation to the race action plan update, you'll be aware at the moment there is no requirement for annual data return of any force in relation to Section 163, which is the Road Traffic Act stops, which there is a feeling that that could be more disproportionality based than other areas or other stops. So within the police race action plan, there is work ongoing to basically bring up a fix within Pronto to record that and start providing that on a data basis. And we're working with Sussex Police, who's got the Pathfinder, who's basically working on that to bring that in place. We believe that the testing of that will be completed by January of next year. So hopefully we'll have that quicker if it comes quicker, but as soon as we've got it, we will take it on board. Other stop and search activity, so we're always looking to improve our understanding of stop and search, and obviously engage with communities to explain why we're using it. So we've done an immersive stop and search exercise which was recently being tested within Calderdale, which looks at bringing the community in to understand the thought process to why a stop search takes place, and bring their skill set to where we are at to try and hopefully get the public to understand why we do use this power. Following consultation with partners in child social care across each of our 5 policing districts, any child who is searched under the age of 17, we will now do a mandatory referral through our systems through to the local authorities as well, just to make sure that we're putting the safeguarding in place there. We've worked on a new stop and search receipt and feedback mechanism which incorporates QR codes which we can provide to members of the public who are stopped and searched. We have the independent scrutiny groups and advisory groups who look at our stop and searches to make sure that we're abiding by best practice. And we'll be shortly relaunching a redesigned stop and search refresher training package to all officers. There's 3 key elements to that. That's consideration prior to conducting a stop and search that the officers have got to do, conducting a stop and search, and then the post-search as well. Because where we want to try and get to is providing the officers with the information of previous stop and searches and outcomes of individuals as well, because that will help them with their decision-making process. And in summary, that's the paper.
Thank you very much. And you know, that's been something that I've raised many, many times. So you talk about having a positive search rate of 22.4, but actually that's nearly 78% of the people who have been stopped, disproportionately so on your own figures, and then that's a legacy of resentment, feelings of discrimination, whether that was the source or not, and it's about how do we prevent that 78% being stopped in the first place. And the learning from the training that you've talked about is clearly something that I hope that people of West Yorkshire will welcome. And I also am really pleased about the work that we're doing on children, because of course we've got to thank the Commissioner, the Children's Commissioner, for the work that she's done on stop and search of children, which we'd already raised after Child Q with yourselves. And it does beg the question, the 0.5, how many children were strip searched? Because it's 0.5. I'm sure I could do the maths if I did 0.5 of the total number. Did you give us the total number?
It is within the paper, but I could go back and provide you with that information.
It's better if you give me the 0.5 and then we don't have to do the maths. Yeah. So yeah, because it's the actual number, I think, is what the public will want to know, not the percentage, which is very small, but still that's people, isn't it? And then the other thing that I was interested in is the increase in the Gemlock stop and searches, which of course you said was intelligence based. and it's more disproportionate than the national average. And yet, you don't tell us in the paper that I remember seeing what their search rate is. Is it better or worse?
It's a higher outcome rate for Gemlock than our normal officers on the street.
Yeah, but
So
it's not higher than 50%.
Oh, no, it isn't, no.
No. So again, the risk of the public feeling the price they're paying is too high because the outcomes are not justifying the stop and search. I think that's just definitely something we need to think about, especially with Gemlock. And I have raised it with Gemlock. I have met James and talked through some of the things that I thought they could be putting in place. And then on the QR code, just to ask, and the training in fact, as you know, the Chief Constable visited Carmanor School with myself, and we met the young boys from Carmanor who had done the Black Boy Joy video, and there was some conversation with them and Richard Close about them having a look at the QR code questions and also potentially being part of the training that was going to be rolled out, you know, the post stop and search training. And I just want to ensure that happens, because it was said to the children at that meeting, and I want to just make sure that we engage them, because they are assets. You know, out of the 31 children involved in the Black Boy Joy video, 29 had been stopped and searched, including one brother of the 29 who was 8 years old. So lots and lots of knowledge and experience there that could feed into that post stop and search training. So to move on to the questions then, with regards to child-related data and previous reports which identified children as young as 5 were included in the data, what assurance can you give me and the public regarding the stop and search of children under the age of 10? The concern being that it might not be recorded, because when we asked this question after Child Q last year, there were lots and lots of data issues that meant that we didn't have assurance about the actual number of children being stopped under 10.
So after that report, what we've done is we've gone back and re-revised all our stop and search policies and made sure that they were fully up to date, and re-educated the workforce in relation to that, because all officers are bound by that stop and search policy. All our searches outside of custody, they are recorded through our handheld system, so our Pronto system, so we can capture all that information now. And obviously data cleanse that and provide it when and if required. We are, unfortunately, there is a little bit of human element with regards to that typing in, and sometimes mistakes are made, but what we're going back to is, if it's evident that a mistake is being made, going back to the officer and making sure that's rectified on the system. The system that we've also got in place is with regards to the scrutiny of those stop and searches. So a bit like the use of force, as Ed mentioned, with regards to the sergeant's role and responsibility, is going back into Pronto, looking at the stop and search, making sure that the grounds are justified, and making sure that the whole stop and search format or form has been fully filled out by the officer. And if they haven't, going back, speaking to the officer and getting that updated. If that officer is a continual offender, then obviously we would then look at the appropriate action to take in relation to those and hold those accountable. We're also providing the independent scrutiny that we've had in place in relation to stop and search as well, so we provide that to the independent scrutiny groups. We capture the stop and searches on body-worn video as well, so we can go and re-look at that, make sure that the whole process has been put in place and has been done right. And then when you look at the current data, what we've had is 8 search records which have been recorded in the last 12 months up until March of this year, where children under the age of 10 have been stopped and searched. Only 2 of those were errors, so it's improving. It is an improving picture.
Well, 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10, yeah.
Yeah, so
and there were 5 where there was 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds stopped by Ops Gemlock in Leeds for carrying offensive weapons as well. So they were positive results in relation to those as well, which is, for me, disappointing that we have children of such a young age carrying offensive weapons on the streets.
Well, probably being exploited by adults to do so, yeah.
But I think with everything that we've put in place, we are improving, and it's an improving picture.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I think it's a brilliant idea to ensure that any child who's stopped and searched gets a referral to social care. And that's a a brilliant thing, and hopefully social care have been included in those conversations so that they know what to put in place. Is there an opportunity when you're doing the training to also remind officers about the See the Child recommendation that was in the Child Queue review, and I'm sure that the Children's Commissioner would also echo that, because obviously this is an area that she's really passionate about too.
We totally agree, and what we want to do is take that information that's been provided and actually embed that into our training, because what we always try to do is refresh our training on a 12-monthly basis to keep it up to date as possible. So we will take those recommendations.
Good, and I think we're setting up a new scrutiny group into stopping searches of children. I think we might be doing that. So that's another opportunity to put in some extra due diligence. So I think we've asked for future reports to be broken down by reason for stop search, including ethnicity, age and gender.
Yeah.
So if for the report that we've got now, that could be done retrospectively outside of this meeting, that'd be great, but going forward, that's it's really interesting and useful information.
We'll take that away as an action and provide that for this report and for future.
Thank you. In terms of overall stop and search, how much of an impact does the description of the suspect passed to the searching officer have on disparities, do you think, and what work has been done to look at this?
This is something that we can't actually pull off our systems, so it's really difficult to actually measure and say, right, and the result of this is X with regards to percentage. Obviously, if we are provided with a description from a member of the public, whether that's a victim or a witness, it does help with the officer's discretion with regards to that individual who they stop and whether that search should take place. So what we do through the contact function is try to get that information if it's readily available. If not, then obviously the officer is just working on their grounds of the information and intelligence that they're provided at the time. So the training that we now do, we talk to officers about the see, know and believe when formulating the grounds, which obviously the description forms part of that, to help their thinking with regards to should or should I not take place, should the search take place.
Yeah, bearing in mind 80% of people are innocent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So, as you know, I've been challenging the force for a long time to carry out an audit of training provision about the use of police powers, which you have conducted, which is brilliant. When that happened, when Tyrone Joyce took me through that process, there was evidence that powers were being used more proportionately. But as we know, even though it's reduced to 2.4, but that's because there are more BME people in the community, really, you've had a bit of a gift there. We do see that disparity is increasing in some areas, and particularly in Gemlock. So I just wondered what you're doing to make sure that that learning that happened before is not lost and it's still embedded in that training.
Right, so obviously we had the HMI CFRS come in to inspect our stop and search records. I'm pleased to say that 96% of those, the grounds reviewed, were deemed to be appropriate. However, going back to your previous point, Deputy Mayor, some of those, the grounds may have been there, but we might not have found anything. So it still does not provide reassurance to the public in relation to that matter.
If it wasn't disproportionate, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But the disproportionality is the thing that renders it wrong.
Yeah. So what we are utilising is our independent advisory groups and scrutiny groups to obviously feed that information through, look at those stop and searches, and the main reason that we do that is to hold us accountable for the use of our powers, because we want that independent scrutiny. We've also reviewed the training that we provide to the recruits and obviously the officers as well, because it's okay bringing the new recruits in, but obviously we've got our standard officers that we need to make sure are fully trained and brought up to date. So what we've then done is revised our e-learning search package as well, with regards to the most appropriate means by which to deal with the situation and actually focus on the quality of the encounter. And that training is planned to be rolled out and completed by the end of this summer of 2023, so bringing that package right up to date just to keep on refreshing it. What I will say with stop and search, and I say this every time, is we need to keep on doing this and refreshing and revising year on year, because just doing it this year is not going to make the changes that we need to do. We need to keep on getting that information, that feedback from the communities, from independent advisory groups, and refresh and retrain. And
then it needs to impact the outcomes, doesn't it? Either a higher rate of find or a lower rate of disproportionality, and actually an improved rate of satisfaction with policing amongst black communities, because I think they're all linked, aren't they?
Yeah, and I'm hoping each time we bring this paper back to you, the fine rate is increasing and the disproportionality is decreasing.
And then you find that satisfaction is going up. So, I'm not Mystic Meg, but you know that's what I think is probably going to happen. A while ago, I asked the Chief Constable to carry out a self-assessment as to whether the force was complying with the College of Policing authorised professional practice on the use of police powers. I asked him to feed back to the college any areas that he felt needed to be improved. So I just wondered if the assessment had taken place and if any changes had happened as a result.
Yeah, so we have looked at the College of Policing, we have looked at the approved professional practice, and that's what I talked about, bringing up to date our policy to make sure it is fully up to date with everything that's occurring at this moment in time. We continue to liaise with the HMIC inspections as well, and what's coming out from the forces and what can we learn from that, either good practice or where we need to make improvements, and comparing and contrasting our own policies and procedures. And we're content at this moment in time that we are applying with that approved professional practice as well, APP. We're continually monitoring force policy as well and practice by that dip sampling and making sure that we are doing it both at a force level and a local level, as well as that overarching independent advisory group assessments as well. And we will continually test that against the HMIC self-assessment and the peel inspection process as well, to make sure that we are fully up to date with everything that is out there. Bearing in mind it is a continually changing picture, and we need to make sure that we maintain that up to dateness.
Thank you. We've talked about Gemlock, and the question was about the outcome rates. You said it was in the report, but I didn't see it.
It was in the report.
The disproportionality rate was there.
I thought it was. It might be my mistake. But I can talk you through what we've got at this moment in time with regards to their measurable outcomes for Gemlock. So when you look at it at this moment in time, their activity, we've seized through Gemlock 1,599 weapons that have been seized. There's been a total of 8,334 arrests made. The stop searches now stand at 9,139, and the intelligence submissions that they've provided equates to 17,090 reports. When you look at the positive outcomes, sorry, it's in my data, that's where I'm getting it from. The period last year, for the short-term trend, it was 29.9% was their outcome rate, so slightly higher, as I was saying. In the last 3 months, there's been a 0.1% fall in that, so it's 29.8%. But then when you look at the long-term trend, their fine rate is 31.8%. But in the last 12 months, there has been a larger fall of 1.5%, and that currently stands at 30.4%.
Yeah, and so it's obviously an improvement on the rest of the force, but of course the impact of the disproportionality, there's got to be a measuring of, is it worth the impact on those communities and the trust and confidence from those communities in policing.
It certainly is, and I think one of the worrying things there as well is that the trend has just started to tip down, where we've always seen quite a, year-on-year steady progress of it increasing and increasing. Yeah,
of course, and I do feel that Gemlock is really the key in the short term, and doing some more work with Gemlock about stop and searches is a good way to start. Yeah, thank you. So it's good to see the National Police Chiefs Council commitment to adopting a mechanism for recording EDI for all vehicle stops, as you talked about, and you've told us that we're going to get it in January at the earliest, and it might not be.
Well, at the same time of them doing the national work that they're doing at this moment in time, we are trying to look at an internal fix that we might be able to put in place prior to that. So yes, there is the national work, but if we can do something much quicker internally through our digital policing team, we will do, and we'll bring that on board as quickly as possible. So
that's good, because obviously doing all this work on stop and search, use of force, making some inroads in use of force in particular, but you don't know what's happening with section 163's traffic stops, and there could be all sorts of things happening there that are undermining the work that you're doing elsewhere, so that's brilliant. Has there been any recent work undertaken to review the crime levels and patterns in areas where stop and search is used more prevalently? And given its impact, what assurances can you give me that it will reduce crime and improve community safety?
Hopefully I can, Deputy Mayor. So we obviously monitor crime levels on a daily basis at the district through the district intelligence units. We also have a live Power BI system which overlays where the crime is recorded and where the stop searches are carried out, so we can marry up both of those pieces of information. And what we've also done through the recent local accountability meetings, which are the quarterly meetings where the Deputy and I hold the districts to account, stop and search was part of that on the last round of this year. And what we've done is drill down to a ward level basis to understand their use of stop and search, and especially disproportionality as well, and the understanding of that. And basically the districts were asked to provide reassurance to the use of stop and search. We also measure the direct find rate and other positive outcome rates in relation to that as well, and overlay that information. And what we use it for is to basically provide the information to the officers to direct them to where the areas that they need to be concentrating on, where they may need to use their powers under stop and search. And certainly that's overlaid, especially in relation to the knife crime, serious violent and violent crime on the street as well, to provide them with that information.
Thank you. And yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to have a long-term view over the trends and see whether or not it is a downward trend. But yeah, I know you haven't got that data yet, but it'd be good to see that in the longer term. Well, thank you for that. And obviously, for those people watching in West Yorkshire, this is something that we're really passionate about. And obviously, I've got the national lead for equality, diversity and race disparities. So it's an area of particular interest for me, notwithstanding I'm a black person coming from Chapeltown, and you know, it's personal to me and my family too. So I'm very interested in understanding how we're going to you know, have better conversations with all our communities. So thank you. So we move on to mental health, and interesting paper, thank you. I just look forward to hearing more.
Yeah. So if I just quickly summarise it then, so at the moment we on average deal with 1,500 mental health recorded incidents per month. Analysis shows that not everything that comes through to us in the first instance when the call is recorded at the front end actually shows it as a mental health incident. However, when officers attend and through their inquiries, it will reveal that it's mental health concerns are evident. Although our demand picture is now stable, we have seen an 11% increase over the last 5 years of mental health incidents. And in October 2022, we did a deep dive into the 24-hour period of mental health incidents, which showed 173 hours of officer time was taken up with mental health incidents, with one suicide totalling 20 hours of the officer's time. While Section 136 detentions remain consistently low, we're beginning to see some longer waiting times for the handover to the relevant hospital. An analysis from one district highlighted in a 1 week period 160 hours of police officers' time wasted just sat within a Section 136 suite waiting to hand over a patient. We've now placed Chief Inspector Nick Ireland and seconded him into corporate services to take on the thematic strategic lead to work with partners within the mental health partnership, and he's looking at the key drivers and demands and pathways for support and appropriate interventions, both from a policing perspective but also from a partnership perspective. Main reasons for officer attendance at mental health calls relate to general calls for service from members of the public where mental health has been recognised as a factor, people who make repeated calls for service who suffer from mental health problems, and people who enter crisis and need to be detained by police officers and taken to a place of safety. There's lots of partnership work that is ongoing, which is covered within the paper. We've also done a lot of work in relation to suicide prevention, because as you're aware, we're now entering the final of a 2-year funded suicide prevention coordinator post, and their role is to gather all that suicide information, both internally and from partners, and to establish a current picture of suicide within West Yorkshire, so real-time surveillance and working with bereaved families and how we can reduce the incidences of suicide. The work so far is having a tangible benefit towards a target of a 10% reduction in suicide across West Yorkshire, and there's negotiations on with partnerships at the moment to how do we mainstream that funding to move that forward and continue with that. There's obviously ongoing work. You will have heard of the Right Care, Right Person, which has come out of the HMIC review of Humberside. The executive officers of statutory agency now in place at a national level to basically embed the RCRP principles across the UK, and we're looking at the necessary guidance and legal structures coming through hopefully later in this year, and it will be forming part of future HMIC FRS inspections as well to see how forces are progressing. I'm pleased to say that the work that Humberside have done is based very much upon the policies that we've already got in place within West Yorkshire with regards to the hospital absconder and welfare policies that we've had in for a number of years now. And when we have gone to Humberside and looked at their plan or what they've implemented, it's a three-step process. We've already implemented 2 of those steps of processes, so we've only got 1 to do, which we've already agreed to, and we will move forward with that. And you'll be aware that in collaboration with the Mayor's Office, we've reinstated the Criminal Justice Mental Health Forum as well, and that board will support the delivery of the RCRP principles and will help us move forward.
Thank you. And just to say that in relation to police suicide, which I'm also really concerned about, and with my previous role as Chief Executive of a mental health organisation, I was really pleased that West Yorkshire Police have made contact with Jess Parker in the ICB, and now are looking to formulate a suicide prevention strategy for West Yorkshire Police staff and officers, which is really welcome. So hopefully that will lead to some better outcomes. So given the financial constraints across the public services and the need to reduce mental health demand on policing, have you got any timescales for the Right Care, Right Person programme? And is there any money coming? Because according to government last week, some money's coming.
Yeah, we're waiting to see what that actually means for West Yorkshire. I can't give you that information at this moment in time. However, there's no specific timelines. However, we are expecting something to come out from central government with regards to June 2023, we think, June of this year. However, as I've said, we've already gone and visited Humberside, so we don't want to basically sit on our hands in relation to this. You know, in West Yorkshire we don't do that. So the legal advice that they've had is based on the same legal advice that we got for the hospital and the welfare absconder policies, which I say we've put in place and we've reduced demand there. So there is a little bit further training that we need to do to take step 3, which is certainly within the contact function of directing the call to the right agency, and i.e. not us taking it on board if it isn't for us to do. So we're looking to have that done and implemented by the 5th of June of 2023.
Right, that's great.
So there's a little bit further work to then do with regards to section 136 and the handover of patients at suites. I can't give you a timeline of that because obviously we need to work with the partners in relation to that, but that will be the next step as well with regards to arrival, handover, and then us coming away.
Brilliant, thank you. What are the contingencies though should partners not be able to respond as you'd like within the timescales?
I'm not, if I'm perfectly honest, I'm not too concerned in relation to this area, because the work that we've done with the hospital absconder, which we put in place in April 2019, the work that we did with the welfare policy, which we put into place in February 2020, so we've had this for some time now. We did all the negotiations at the time with partners, both at a strategic and also at an operational level, worked on the policies with them, trained and briefed collectively together. So I'm not overly concerned, because we're I'd probably say 90% of the way there at this moment in time. The one area still to have that further discussion is just that handover at section 136 suites. That's it.
Thank you. I welcome the recognition of more training and development to better recognise and understand the complexities around mental health and neurodiversity. And I welcome its rollout to the control room staff and practitioners. Do you have a time frame for this one, and how much mental health training is currently available for student officers?
Yeah, so the rollout to contact, we're hoping by the 5th of June, fingers crossed if everything goes well. The rollout to our frontline practitioners is going to be a little bit more difficult, because obviously there's a lot more involved. However, we've got an ambitious plan to have that delivered by the end of June. There might be some little slippage on that and some wash up that we have to do after that, but we will do it. Just to reassure you, obviously all our officers and staff have previously received mental health training. It's not something that we haven't done in the past. All student officers get a mental health input as part of their initial training, and also basic training in dealing with people in crisis as well, so that's part of their welcome to the organisation. And then all newly promoted sergeants, inspectors receive mental health input on their legal responsibilities, which is part of their supervisory training as well, to bring theirs up to speed, but also with regards to force policies and local ongoing partnership processes as well, just so they're fully up to speed.
Good, thank you. We're on to the next paper, and I'm conscious that you're doing a lot of talking. Would you like some water?
Yes, please.
I'll go.
Yeah, thank you, Ed.
You got water. You got water.
That's okay.
Sure. Yeah, so you're happy. Our regular update on neighbourhood crime, and yeah, happy to have you introduce the paper.
Yes, thank you very much. The paper is positive because the downward, the travel is downwards when we look at it. So burglary residential down 32.6%. That's despite an increase in the last 12 months of 8.2%. And the only exception within the paper, as you can see, Deputy Mayor, is for theft of motor vehicle when compared to the 12 months to June 2019, it's increased, which is a national reflected picture as well. So during that 12 months to January 2023, we've achieved an additional 247 positive outcomes when compared to the previous 12 months. And the outcome rate is now at 4.3%, which is comparable to pre-pandemic levels. However, 4.3 for me isn't good enough. We need to be higher. It's a positive picture, but we do need to be higher. Satisfaction levels, however, when you look at the same period, apart from theft from person, has dropped, which is what we're seeing nationally. However, when you look at the data over the last 3 months, we've started seeing a positive increase because we changed how we dealt with satisfaction as an organisation, and we're now starting, after doing the trial within Calderdale, seeing that coming back up. So, tackling neighbourhood crime, you can see within the paper we concentrate on 3 things: place, people and businesses, and that's how we tackle it. Within the paper it also details some of the good work which is going across the 5 districts to target and disrupt neighbourhood crime offenders. I'd encourage the public to read it because there is some really positive work within the paper. And it also describes the Crime Tracker, which is a service that we provide as part of our victim and care support programme, which can keep the victim updated with the status of their crime. And it also describes the successful bids with regards to the Safer Streets funding, which we always welcome, and how we've used this money to target offenders and target hardened property, and more importantly, reduce crime. And with regards to crime prevention, it also talks through how we've been using some of that money to do forensic marking schemes, the Easy Street burglary campaign, the keyless entry scheme, which is in relation to vehicles and how they are being stolen, and cycle prevention, crime prevention campaign as well. So in summary, that's the paper.
Brilliant. And next Mayor Safe Communities Fund opens on the 9th of May, and obviously we would welcome applications from anyone who wants to deliver against policing crime plan, including from the police. And great news about the Crime Tracker, because in relation to satisfaction, communication from the police is one of the key things that affects that criteria, so really good. You mentioned on page 2 about other forces also having problems with theft of motor vehicles. Could you give us an understanding of where other forces stand with neighbourhood crime, and especially those in our most similar group?
Yeah, so when you look at the most similar group as a collective, theft of motor vehicle, they're showing a 31.2% increase for that particular. And then if you look at total neighbourhood crime as a whole, a 16.6% increase. When you then look at West Yorkshire, our theft of motor vehicle rate is 33.5%, so slightly higher from that 31.2%, and total crime 17.6%, again just slightly higher than the 16.6%. That's a collective of those most similar groups put together. I haven't looked at them individually, just put them together.
And how do our outcome rates compare?
The outcome rates were 0.1% lower than the MSGs.
And is that between all crime types?
That's overall. I could give you everyone here if you'd want.
No, we can just send it to us afterwards.
I'll send you the table.
Wendy's very interested in this stuff, and it does help to inform some of our thinking and understanding of progress against the metrics in the Policing and Crime Plan, so that'd be very welcome. Thank you. do we understand why theft from the person victim satisfaction has increased when everything else has decreased?
Quite simply, it's because this is such a small sample size of individuals that we look at, so it's not technically statistically, I'm putting my teeth back in, significant, if I can say the words. So over that 12-month period, there's only been 119 victims who have actually been surveyed in relation to that. So that accounts for why there's probably been such a big increase at this moment in time.
Right, okay, thank you. So offender management is a key part of the prevention of neighbourhood crime, as mentioned in your report. What is the current position with offender management in West Yorkshire, and how does this drive the prevention of neighbourhood crime?
Right, so you'll be well aware that we've got our integrated offender management teams, and we've got those within each of the 5 districts, which is brilliant. We reviewed and refreshed those at the end of 2021 because we realised that we needed to concentrate more with regards to the neighbourhood crime. So our model now has dedicated offender management, and then they're supported by catch and convict officers as well, who work alongside our non-statutory partners. So the cohort of offenders are responsible for neighbourhood crime in communities based on previous offending and intelligence, and using that offending and intelligence either puts them on to the programme or off the programme, because obviously if they're offending, we want them on. If they're disengaged, don't want to engage with us, that's where the catch and convict, and we will pursue those. And what we try to do, and it's through a multi-agency approach as well, it's not just the police on their own, we do work with our partners, is seek to divert those offenders away from offending. And as I say, if they want to engage, brilliant, we'll have them on the programme, we'll work with them. If they don't want to engage, well, guess what, they're going to be getting locked up, and we'll put them through the court process.
Oh, good, well, I'm sure that's reassuring for people in West Yorkshire. I think I know the answer to this one. Do we have serious and organised crime groups in West Yorkshire that affect neighbourhood crime? What areas do they operate, and what's being done to stop that activity?
Right, so obviously we map all our organised crime groups and urban street gangs across the force areas, so it's something that we've done. Predominantly they are related to drugs, antisocial behaviour and serious violent crime, and they're managed through our precision teams that we've got within each of the districts as well. And then the neighbourhood teams support them with the management of the groups, intelligence submissions, targeted activities, and they also do the reassurance patrols within the communities. So the ones that are specifically related to neighbourhood crime, surprise, surprise, it's vehicle crime, which is the key one that they sort of concentrate on, and there's some in relation to street robberies as well, committed by gangs, and again they are managed through our precision teams. So we've got a serious and organised crime community coordinator who support the delivery of clear whole bill programmes. So we have a number within the force, and when they're identified, we'll go in there and support those to basically clear the ground and then hold it, and then work with the partners to build that as well. But yes, there are certain groups that are targeting neighbourhood crime types.
Thank you. How is Crime Tracker being promoted? Because until I read this report, I've not heard of it, and it is brilliant. And are there specific crime types where this is used?
So we didn't do a specific media campaign on the back of this at the time, and there was a thought process that went into that. So there was a media campaign which was done with reference to 101 calls last year, which is Ed World, and we looked at potentially would we do a campaign in relation to that, but we thought at the time it would increase call volumes, and with the demand that we were dealing with at the time, we couldn't take that risk. Also, the Crime Tracker, it provides information, but it only provides limited information at this moment in time, and what we're trying to do is improve it as we work forward. So with regards to crime types, no specific crime types, you can go on it whichever your crime, so any particular crime you could access that and get the basic information. But from a sort of innovation perspective, what we're trying to do is review it, benchmark what others are doing and improve it, because once we're in a position where we think it is as best as we can make it, then what we want to do is then market it so people can contact and look at their updates on crime through that process, rather than having to either contact the officer or come through the contact centre.
So when the quality's up to snuff, then you'll roll it out. Yeah, that's sensible. Thank you. So we're nearly there.
Final stretch.
So neighbourhood policing and antisocial behaviour, which obviously major issues for many of the people of West Yorkshire.
Right then, so you know this is what I love, neighbourhood policing. So through local policing, and you'll be aware what we've done is within corporate services, which was Saraswell, we've split out and we've got a dedicated local policing command now, which has got a chief superintendent running that, which is Chris Gibson. So through that we monitor the vacancies of all police officers and PCSOs within the neighbourhood policing teams. So there's been specific agenda item on the last reassurance board, which was on the 30th of January, which is the board that I chair. And we've also had that as part of the local accountability meetings, the last round that myself and Ma'am Hankinson did as well, with regards to understanding not only the vacancies, but more importantly, what are the districts doing to obviously backfill those vacancies. So the current staffing levels and vacancies, which are probably the big thing you want to look at, are within the report and there at the top of page 2 for the public when they read it. The reason that we're carrying vacancies within that world at this moment in time, we made a decision collectively as chief officers that we would address the HMIC FRS's AFI with regards to safeguarding and getting to 100% staffing within safeguarding. That didn't mean us pulling staff out of neighbourhood policing teams, it just meant that as vacancies occurred, they weren't being replaced as fast enough, and what we were having to wait for was obviously the new recruits coming through, who obviously, as you're well aware, take a little bit longer to get trained at this moment in time. 3 years, yeah. So that did impact not only on neighbourhood policing teams but other departments across the districts as well. But what we've now got in place is with regards to the plans of how they will be filled up as those cohorts come online over the next 12 months and obviously reaching our required levels. Through that period as well, we've also needed to maintain our operational resilience on our patrol teams as well, because we've got to keep it at a certain level so we can turn out the right amount of units to actually answer those calls. And because we've had such a surge in demand, which hopefully we're now coming over the hump of, some of those MPT resources were used to, when demand obviously tipped to a high level, were used to backfill to help out with some of that call handling. I'm pleased to say that between January 2022 and 23, we've had 8 cohorts of PCSOs coming through, so 91 coming through, and we've done a recruitment event recently as well, which hopefully we'll have more. When you then look at antisocial behaviour, that's showing a 31.2% reduction, but I don't want the public to think that we're on top of antisocial behaviour. What we've done is a lot of work in relation to crime recording and making sure that when that call comes in, we record it correctly, because you're aware we're outstanding our crime data integrity and we want to increase that. When you look at the increase in crime that we're recording compared to the reduction in antisocial behaviour, we actually think the true figure is a reduction of 9% in antisocial behaviour in total. However, there are still issues on the streets that we still need to maintain and deal with and problem solve. So we still have our antisocial and vulnerability assessment tool, which we call ASVAT. So all our antisocial logs go through that to identify and evaluate risk effectively. Our appeal inspection back in 21-22 highlighted our good use of that and an innovative practice that we brought in, which got us our outstanding, or helped us get to our outstanding in neighbourhood policing. And what we've then since done on top of that, because we don't want to sit still, is we've trained those staff who work through that, our antisocial behaviour coordinators, or neighbourhood coordinators, with regards to crime recording standards. So what they're doing is that second audit process, and if any crime recording has been missed, they're recording it to make sure that gets on the system and we're not missing any vulnerability. And we've been running a pilot since January 23 where we're putting all public order offences through that as well, just in case we're missing any antisocial behaviour. Repeat ASB call locations, the top 20 are recorded within the paper, and that's looking at the last 6 months to January 2023, and they're at Appendix C. And also within that paper is the examples of the work undertaken to reduce those calls and those repeat locations to problem solve them. We obviously use the ASARA model for problem solving, and all our staff are going through, our LMPT staff, a 3-day bespoke neighbourhood policing course accredited by Skills for Justice, where we're training them up on problem solving as well, so we're working through those. An audit in February of our problem solving showed that we're effectively creative and managed in the majority of occasions, and then within the paper is the Safer Street Fund for funding, and that shows an example in relation to Bradford of how we've used that money to target antisocial behaviour, motorbike nuisance across 5 wards, led to 19 operations. lots of targeted work, lots of ongoing work within communities and partners, and I'm pleased to say 65 offences dealt with positively, 12 vehicles taken off the streets, and 1 arrest made on the back of that as well. So again, good use of those funds. And
I'd like to do a case study actually of that work and the funds, because I think it's something to celebrate and to show the public how pocket monies are being reinvested back into not just the community but also effective outcomes for policing. So I think that'd be something that would be helpful. Brill. When you said that you're bringing 91 new officers on, is that through the PEQF or is that through a building?
Sorry, that's PCSOs that we've brought through
right,
the cohorts.
Well, that's good. That's very good. So you talked about the deficit in police constables, and obviously that's been a concern. So I think you've picked up in your report how we're going to be addressing that and the reasons for the large deficit.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well, that there is 22 police officers coming out of the Central Assessment Unit this month back into districts to then backfill the neighbourhood policing, because obviously we're reducing the assessor to student numbers, which means we can release those. The benefit of that also is as our numbers of students come down from July onwards of this year to February, we can reduce those numbers even further, which will mean more coming out. So these are experienced officers coming back to districts, which means we can then put them back into neighbourhood policing.
And I think it's really important for the public to understand that the money is there. The Mayor committed to 750 police officers and staff. We asked the public to give £15 this time round for the precept. The money is there, but the reason that the neighbourhood policing teams are not at the levels that we want them to be is because of priorities in other arenas such as state safeguarding, which obviously is one of the reasons why we've managed to get 505 years sentences for Operation Tendency. But obviously the public expects to see the officers that they're funding through their £15 et al. to be delivered. So yeah, as soon as we can do that, the public will be happy. So thank you. Is there an understanding of the increase in demand and how this feeds through to neighbourhood policing? Apart from the audits, is there ongoing work to ensure that neighbourhood officers are only utilised for work elsewhere when absolutely necessary, and how is this currently decided? You picked this up, but I just want to dig in a bit further, because obviously that's all fine. Abstractions. I was at Crofton last night listening to the public there about antisocial behaviour, and they're really feeling it, even though the overall numbers are coming down. They are feeling the impact, and so we need the abstractions to stop, and we need those officers and PCSOs on those streets.
Yeah, so I think it's a double whammy, isn't it? Because we've got the abstractions, we've got the vacancies, so that's why the public are feeling, that neighbourhood resources out there. What I'm pleased to say is we reviewed all our policies with regards to what officers should and shouldn't attend, as well as PCSOs, and reviewed all those policies. We did that as part of the implementation of the neighbourhood project originally when we rebranded Neighbourhood and relaunched it. We've done it again to make sure that's fully up to date and up to speed. We then, through local policing, monitor the abstraction rate. What I'm pleased to say is it's actually steadily coming down again now. So we were at 23.6%, we're now down to 22% of abstractions. We still need to come down further, but it is reviewed. I could provide you with a lovely table which shows all this information.
Yeah, but it's still significant, 22%.
It is.
Is that 22% of all neighbourhood policing?
Yeah, and then put on top of that the vacancies that we've got as well.
I mean, this is why they're feeling it. Yeah, this is why they're feeling it. And again, I think a proper understanding of that is good, because obviously I'm all about transparency and the public understanding what's happening and why I think is very helpful. On page 4, it talks about the reduction in antisocial behaviour logs alongside the increase in crime recording due to data integrity. How do we determine the trends in ASB when we now need to include crimes in the picture? And page 6 talks about repeat ASB locations. Is that just for ASB logs, or are crimes included also?
No, crimes are included also in relation to that, so we put that through. We've had harassment in there for some time as well. So we look at the entire data set, which basically shows us our repeat victims' locations, helps us identify that, as well as those public order offences, as I say, that we've been running through on a trial, which will stay within the system as well, because we're seeing real benefits in putting that information through. So that all helps with identifying those hotspots, helping with the problem solving, and sort of laser guiding us to where we need to be.
Thank you. In the paragraph about ASVAT, it's saying that public order logs have been included since January, but it's clear from Appendix C that the main crime area that's risen is harassment, and can we be sure that harassment is also being dealt with so that we don't have another Pilkington?
Yeah, so harassment was in from the start, so that went in December of 2019 when we launched ASVAT, because ASVAT, I should have said, was launched on the back of the Pilkington inquiry.
Yeah, good.
And the work we did at the time.
Thank you. I really welcome the audit of problem-solving occurrences and note that 82.5% had evidence that NPTs were working closely in partnership to resolve the issues. Did the audit pick up any data about the length of time it's taken to resolve occurrences, and do we ensure that problems don't just move to another location?
Yeah, so the key part of that review was in relation to the supervisory review. So the supervisors, we have a sergeant's review at day 28 and then an inspector's review at day 58. So even though we can't put a specific time on how long it will take to deal with the problem, because some are quick, some are longer term, what we found was those key supervisory oversight reviews are making sure that it's progressing in a timely manner, and that we're not only looking at ourselves to solve the problem, but our partners as well. And then what we've done with regards to our innovation, we've worked with digital policing, and we've created a Power BI app which is in relation to problem solving and demand management as well. So what we're trying to do is give the information to the officers and staff at a touch of the fingers, and what we can then do is maintain that strategic and tactical overview of how we're problem solving, what activity is going on and how successful it is. And then the final bit of that process, to make sure it's not moving from one location to another, is before that problem solving occurrence can be written off, it's looked at by the inspector, and what we are checking is, A, have we problem solved it and has demand reduced, but also making sure it hasn't moved to another location. And if it has, we won't shut it down, we will just change the location type of where the problem has moved to.
Thank you. So we're on to the cost of living exception paper. So for the public, every meeting we have a exception paper which can be on any topic that we feel would be helpful and beneficial for us to find out more about. It's the second cost of living paper, so we had one at the last meeting, and that primarily focused on impact on police, and now it's impact on the public, and we're particularly interested in the impact of cost of living on children and neglect. Yeah, happy to have your overview of the paper.
So the cost of living crisis presents an additional risk of child neglect due to our county's higher levels of child poverty. Over a third of children already growing up in poverty. The reports of cruelty to children have increased significantly since 2021. So when the public look at the graph, you'll see there's a massive spike in relation to that. What I want to do is obviously reassure you in relation to the reasons for that spike, because that's been ongoing since March 2021, so not necessarily linked to the cost of living crisis, but some of the implementations that we've put in place as an organisation. So in 2021, we amended our referral process to children's social care through the introduction of the public protection notices, what we call PPNs, so that's seen an increase. We've changed our practices after the national publication of the tragic murders of Arthur Libingo Hughes and also Star Hobson, which is obviously the local one. We've continually invested in our continuous professional development, and what I mean by that is the training of officers and staff to spot the signs of abuse as well. And there's been that continuous improvement on our crime data integrity, because as you have said, we are currently outstanding. We want to continue to be outstanding. So what we did on the back of that is through the Force Crime Registrar, we began unannounced visits and audits of our safeguarding units and our multi-agency safeguarding hubs as well, and making sure that reports that are coming through, not through West Yorkshire such, but might be through partners and other organisations, that we were recording those correctly. And that accounts for why there's been such a significant increase in that recording. So those combined just show where we're trying to get our compliance and correct crime recording in place. It then moves on to the demand for strike action. So you'll be aware that police officers can't strike, but we do have business continuity plans in place for police staff if any industrial action does take place moving forward. We continue to work closely and collaborate with our other emergency service partners to ensure our response is provided and it's the correct agency that goes at that time. And we've already discussed the right care, right person model we're looking to fully implement. We also have a trigger plan in place for industrial action to monitor all proposed strike activity and assess the potential impact on our service. And then the impact on workforce and the supportive wellbeing initiatives we've got in place. So when we've done some of the work, one of the key things that comes back with regards to staff and officers is parking charges and the impact that really has on 24/7 staff, because they don't have the same access to the use of public transport. So we are promoting car sharing and also looking at other options with regards to parking. Health and Wellbeing team, they launched a force-wide financial wellbeing survey in force in December 2022, which closed in the January of this year. And that looked to identify how we could improve the financial resilience of our employees, and there was over 1,470 responses to that. We're now considering those responses and looking at financial coaching application, and would that be beneficial, and allowing access to free financial coaching for officers and staff, and potentially allowing access to some of their salary in advance. We've already got a number of support mechanisms in place for officers and staff that they can obviously access. The Employee Assistance Programme, chaplaincy, peer support, TRIM, obviously our unions and federation. And then to support parents and carers during the teacher strike, we provided a critical care worker letter that they could obviously provide to the school. And in certain circumstances where it was deemed necessary, we also considered dependency leave for staff as well. And in summary, that's the paper, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. With the significant increase in child neglect since 2021 and noting the training for detective sergeants and crime clerical officers in child protection roles, what specific training do neighbourhood police officers receive to spot the signs of neglect and abuse in the home? And can you say more about the benefits of the pilot that you've mentioned here on page 3?
Yeah, so we've delivered lots of different periods or pieces of training we continue to do. So the first one was the raising awareness of understanding and identifying vulnerability, which was rolled out. We then did training on making safeguarding referrals, including identifying cumulative risk as well with regards to, it's not just one thing, it might be several things, and obviously putting all that through forward. We've provided training on making safeguarding referrals through the public protection notices, so there is one way across all 5 districts now with regards to providing that information to partners as well, and that was done in consultation with the local authorities as well, which was really warmly received. We've done a neglect I Learn package as well, and also raising awareness of the importance of professional curiosity through the COVID pandemic as well. So in terms of the pilot, we've nominated ourselves to trial a toolkit that would allow investigators to build up a much stronger picture of the evidence and around a child and perpetrator when allegations of sexual abuse are made. And furthermore, we've now successfully bid to the NSPCC to be one of the 3 forces nationally to pilot their shared toolkit as well. It's just too early to actually say what's been the result of that. So we're looking at all options out there and continue to train and continue to look at best practice as well to improve our response.
Thank you. And do you also include recognising psychological abuse in training?
We look at all forms and respond to all forms of child abuse and neglect. So obviously the Serious Crime Act and the Domestic Abuse Act put the child as a victim in their own right as well, which is brilliant. Obviously all forms of harm provide challenges around identification, I could put my teeth in today, and disclosure. It's the last paper. So this is why we continue to work with the staff and the officers to continue to increase their training, because as new evidence comes to light, new training comes to light, what we want to do is make sure that we provide the information to the staff and the officers. And we've also been working with our multi-agency safeguarding hubs as well to ensure that they're fully trained, and we're currently going through the process of reviewing those as well to make sure that they are the best that they can be to safeguard children. And again, I'm pleased to say that all 5 local authorities are signed up to that and as part of that process as well.
Good. As you know, mental health is one of my passions, and I'm really concerned about police officer and staff mental health, and it's a constant conversation that I have with the Federation, and I'm particularly interested in the mental health of our new students, bearing in mind that the PEQF has meant that many of the new recruits have been young things, and they're coming into a service where trauma is every day, and they'll be seeing things that most people in the communities that they're serving will not even have thought of, let alone witnessed. Is there anything additional that's there to support those young people coming in to the force?
Yeah, there's lots. So within Leeds Trinity University, which is obviously where we're putting our student officers through, so there's a police sergeant seconded into there, and they act as a conduit between the university and Learning Organisation and Development Department. They meet every Thursday to discuss the progress of all individual students in relation to that. So in relation to the students themselves, the PCDA and DHEP student, they're allocated a progress tutor who monitor the student throughout the duration of their programme, and that's tripartite as well with that sergeant as well, and they have a review every 12 weeks, and obviously have access not only into our services but also into the university service as well. Week 1 of their programme, it contains a wellbeing and resilience session, coping strategies, support, services signposted and explained. They're also provided with a support Padlet, which basically provides useful documentation, and there's also an MS Teams channel as well, which has lots of information about support services that are available to them as well. There are online wellbeing workshops tackling stress, relaxation, motivation, and they're available to be booked through the LTU website, so they provide that. Those students who are struggling with completing written assignments, the Learning Hub offers support and advice, and that's from anything from essay writing, time management, revision strategies, effective note-taking and critical thinking and research. The university have peer support champions, and they host a weekly drop-in session and train to support students. Also through the university, a student may self-refer to their student mental health and wellbeing service by a direct link to the LTU on their website. They will then be offered an assessment either via phone or in person on campus within 48 hours, which is a fantastic service, and then a referral within 2 weeks from that point on. There is also the same referral service if the student doesn't want to refer themselves but a colleague has a concern. They can also refer that individual on their behalf as well, and again student services will then make contact with the student. If you then look back internally for us at Learning and Organisational Development, which is obviously our training session at Cargate, there's several bits that they've got, but there's 4 officers, there's a pastoral team, and they deliver that key week 1 training in relation to mental health and stress. They will also look at whether there is a support plan that needs to be put in place as and when required. They can also provide neurodiversity training and quick screening as well, and work-based needs assessments on the student's behalf. They will also provide that conduit between learning and organisational development and our OHU department as well if there's any referrals required. They conduct a twice weekly drop-in centre at Cargate for students, which are widely advertised and promoted. They act as the first point of contact when officers reveal other issues such as being a victim of crime, or usually that is prior to joining the police, and then liaising with supervision to ensure the correct procedure, reporting and right support is provided. There's a pastoral mailbox as well, which basically the students can contact and ask for help and support. They will complete risk assessments as well if there's any pre-existing conditions that the student is suffering from, or there is any subsequent diagnosis that they provide after joining West Yorkshire Police. They will maintain and update the student welfare plans, and they conduct performance reviews with each of those students at 6 and 12 weeks. In support of all that, we also then have our employee assistant programme, which is obviously access to a counsellor if you require it in an emergency, as well as a number of other things. We have our own federation counselling and support. We have our trim process and peer support. And what we're now looking at is a further piece of work with regards to the transition of students from the LNOD environment through into districts as well. If you then look at how we're supporting officers and staff with their mental health, including support for traumatic incidents, we've got numerous policies in place which are there to access where if people are either dealing with a traumatic incident or there's something outside of the organisation that's impacted them. We've also got strict policies with regards to return to work interviews following absence, and obviously helping them back into the workplace and what support may or may not be required. We conduct regular IAMs and one-to-ones, which wellbeing is part of that conversation. There's informal supportive plans if it's required, and obviously if a referral is required to OHU, if they disclose something or the supervisor has concerns, we can provide that as well. We undertake stress risk assessments as and when they are required. And we also have key advisors within the people functions who can provide support to managers for further advice to support individuals well or if they're absent from work. And then there's all sorts of access that we've got either through the trade unions and the police federation as well to support their individual members as well. So we've got trained mental first aiders across the force as well, and we continue to look at expanding that. And then those who we've identified working in key roles which will put them at risk of trauma, they undertake annual psychological screening programme, and that's approximately about 3,000 individuals across the force that we do at this moment in time, and that's done on an annual basis. We continue to look at the training, raising awareness of mental health. So examples of that include mental health awareness training for managers, which was designed by Leeds Mind for West Yorkshire Police and delivered by our own internal trainers. And we also have training from an external provider as well, the Stella Trust as well, following opportunities for funding that we identified.
I know very well.
Yeah. And then there's a number of toolkits that are available and signposting that's available on our intranet site as well, which individuals can access. So we've also then got a little wider than that. We can provide support in place for family members of West Yorkshire Police as well through our chaplaincy and as well as our EAP services as well. So for example, the EAP service, family members, dependents, children have access at no additional cost. This is no cost to officers or staff. Support via the helpline where counsellors are trained to provide onward referral where appropriate, including online CBT techniques. Online and telephone counselling up to 6 sessions as a threshold following the current delivery model, and couples counselling can also be provided if it's deemed clinically approved or appropriate. And we've also just recently approved as well, you'll be aware that we've got wellbeing dogs within the force, 2 at this moment in time. We've just approved for that to be increased to 12 as well by the end of 2023. So in summary, that's the support processes that are in place at this moment in time.
Well, was substantial, and I'd be surprised if there'd be many other organisations could compete with that. But in the end, it's about the the effectiveness, isn't it, and the impact on officers and staff and how useful they find them. So hopefully there's some ongoing evaluation, because there's a lot of stuff, but how much of it is working. But yeah, it's impressive the list of things that you're doing. So we'll keep monitoring how that actually impacts on outcomes. So that's all the questions from us. You'll be very happy to hear. Item 10 is just future agenda items, which I think next time it's serious and organised crime, road safety, drugs and alcohol, violence against women and girls, safety. And the exception paper, which we'll come back to you on, but we're thinking rural or business crime. Yeah, business, because we are often contacted by businesses wanting to understand what we're doing for them, and clearly, even though the cost of living paper didn't talk a lot this time or last time about businesses, they are anecdotally telling us that cost of living is having a massive impact on them. So really interested to know what we're doing. So the next meeting is on Tuesday, the 11th of July, 2023, 2 to 4:30. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and I hope you found that useful. And to any members of the public who are watching, I hope you found that useful. And if you've got comments or questions that you'd like to hear asked, please do feed that back into our office. Thank you very much.